Fusion Mobile, quality e-learning experience on the go.
Nervous coordination. In vertebrates, coordination is achieved through the nervous system and the endocrine system. Coordination deals with the harmonization of the actions of different parts of the body of an organism so that they work together to obtain definite results. The nervous system is made up of the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. The central nervous system is made up of the brain and the spinal cord, while the peripheral nervous system is made up of the somatic nervous system, which is made up of the cranial nerves and the spinal nerves, and also the autonomic nervous system, which is made up of the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. The peripheral nervous system connects the central nervous system to all parts of the body. The nervous system connects all parts of the body together with the aid of the nerves. The mammalian brain. The mammalian brain is enclosed in a bony case called the skull or the cranium for protection. The brain is made up of millions of nerve cells called the neurons. The surface of the brain is made up of the gray matter, which consists of the cell bodies of the nerve cells. The inner part consists of white matter that is made up of nerve fiber or axons, which are covered by a white sheet known as the myelin. The brain is divided into three parts: the forebrain, the midbrain, and the hindbrain. It is made up of two large hemispheres: the right hemisphere, which controls the left half of the body, and the left hemisphere, which controls the right half of the body. This arises because of the crossover of spinal nerves from the right to the left-hand side of the brain and from the left to the right-hand side of it. The adult brain weighs about 1.2 to 1.4 kilograms. The forebrain. The forebrain consists of the cerebrum and the olfactory lobes, which grow from it. The olfactory lobes are responsible for interpreting the sense of smell. The cerebrum in man is larger than in all other animals. The cerebrum is divided into the left and the right halves, which are referred to as the right and the left cerebral hemispheres. The two hemispheres are separated by the median fissure. They are, however, a bond of fibers known as the corpus callosum. The cerebrum is thrown into a lot of convolutions which increase its surface area. The convolutions enable the cerebral surface to contain many more nerve cells. This cerebral surface is also known as the cerebral cortex. The cerebral cortex contains the gray matter, while the inner part contains the white matter. The cerebrum is made up of four parts or lobes, which are the frontal lobe, the parietal lobe, the temporal lobe, and the occipital lobe. The cerebrum is concerned with all voluntary actions. It is associated with the ability to learn, ability to exhibit intelligence, imagination, reasoning, and judgment. A portion of the cerebrum, called the sensory cortex, is responsible for receiving impulses from various sense organs. Another portion, known as the motor cortex, sends impulses to muscles and glands. Other parts of the forebrain include the pineal body, the thalamus, the hypothalamus, and the pituitary gland. The pineal body is a vestigial organ which functions as an eye in some fossil vertebrata. The thalamus is made up of two ovoid-shaped structures attached to the hind part of the forebrain. They receive impulses from the midbrain, hindbrain, and the spinal cord and passes on to the cerebral cortex and vice versa. It is concerned with experiencing sensation, and it is also the seat of consciousness or awareness in man. The hypothalamus is located below the thalami, and it controls the centers for body temperature, appetite, and sleeping. It also coordinates the activities of many external organs as well as sex drive. The hypothalamus is also an endocrine organ whose secretions are influenced by the pituitary gland. The pituitary gland develops from the floor of the hind region of the forebrain. It is an endocrine gland, and it is referred to as the master gland because it controls the other endocrine glands. The midbrain. The midbrain conducts nervous impulses between the forebrain and the hindbrain, and the forebrain and the eyes. It takes part in the maintenance of balance of the organism and controls the sense of sight. It consists of optic lobe, which receives impulses from the eye. The hindbrain is made up of the cerebellum and the medulla oblongata. The cerebellum consists of three parts, which are a central part and two lateral cerebellar hemispheres. The surface of the cerebellum consists of grey matter making up the cerebellar cortex and a central mass of white matter. The cerebellum is concerned with the maintenance of body equilibrium and muscular movement. It is also the unconscious motor coordinating center of the brain. It also controls all involuntary activities like yawning and blinking of the eyelids. It maintains the firmness of muscles and controls the posture of the body. The medulla oblongata. The surface of the medulla consists of white matter, while the inner part is grey. It controls many involuntary movements of the body, especially those concerned with respiration, digestion, and heartbeat. It also regulates the constriction and dilation of blood vessels. The pons varoli is a band of nerve fiber that connects two lateral cerebellar hemispheres. The spinal cord. The spinal cord is a soft white tissue that runs through the neural canals of the vertebrae. It is a continuation of the medulla oblongata. It is protected by the vertebral column. The surface of the spinal cord contains the white matter, while the inner part contains the grey matter. The spinal cord consists of two halves which are fused together to form a small canal. This canal is filled with the cerebrospinal fluid, which is similar to the body fluid. In a transverse section, the grey matter of the spinal cord forms the letter H. There are two fissures, the dorsal, also known as the anterior fissure, and the ventral fissure. The ventral fissure is wide, while the dorsal fissure is narrow. It contains 31 pairs of mixed nerves which arise at regular intervals along its length. In addition to the mixed nerves are sensory and motor nerves or neurons, which also enter the spinal cord. The sensory nerves, which first swells to form a ganglion, which is an aggregate of the cell bodies of several sensory neurons, enters the spinal cord through the dorsal root, which is near the dorsal fissure. The motor nerve enters it via the ventral root, which is near the ventral fissure. A neuron known as the association neuron is found in between the sensory and the motor neurons. The spinal cord helps to carry impulse to the brain, and it also controls reflex actions. The membranes of the brain and spinal cord. The brain and the spinal cord are protected by three membranes known as the meninges. The meninges, apart from their protective function, also form a framework which supports the brain and the spinal cord. The outer membrane is the dura mater, which is a tough, fibrous layer. The inner one is soft and vascularized and is referred to as the pia mater. The arachnoid matter is a thin web-like membrane located between the other two membranes. The spaces between the membranes are filled with cerebrospinal fluid. Structure of a neuron. Neurons are specialized cells which receive and relay neural impulses. There are three types of neurons: the sensory neuron, the motor neuron, and the association or intermediate neuron. A sensory or afferent neurons are neurons that transmit impulses from the receptors, for example, sense organ, liver and heart, to the central nervous system. Their cell bodies are not apical, they are located on one side of the axon, also known as the lateral position. The motor or efferent neurons are typical neurons which transmit impulses from the central nervous system to the effectors, for example, the muscles and the glands. Association or intermediate neurons are those neurons which join sensory neurons with motor neurons and are found only in the central nervous systems. Muscles respond by contracting or relaxing, while glands do so by secreting specific substances. A neuron is made up of three parts, which are a cell body, dendrons, and the axon. A cell body may be oval, polygonal, angular, or star-shaped. it possesses a large nucleus and dense granulated cytoplasm. The granulated cytoplasm gives the cell body its grayish color. The nucleus and the cytoplasm are enclosed by the cell membrane. The cell bodies are located in the cerebral cortex and the central portion of the spinal cord. The dendrons are cytoplasmic processes or extensions which arise from the cell body. Dendrons terminate in hair-like projections known as dendrites. Dendrons and dendrites are responsible for transmitting impulses towards the cell body. The axon is a long fiber which transmits impulses away from the cell body. It consists of a long nerve process, the axis cylinder, which is surrounded by a cylinder of fatty substance known as the myelin sheath, which gives the axon its white color. A thin membrane, the neurolemma, encloses the myelin sheath, which acts as an insulator and also speeds up the transmission of impulses. The myelin sheath is interrupted at intervals by certain constrictions called nodes of Ranvier. A number of small nuclei, called sheath nuclei, are located in the neurolemma. The axon divides into a number of fine processes known as the dendrites at its free end. Neurons which possess myelin sheaths are said to be myelinated, while those without myelin are non-myelinated. The myelin sheath increases the speed at which impulses travel along an axon. As earlier discussed, there are three types of neurons: the sensory neuron, the motor neuron, and the association or intermediate neuron. Neurons are also grouped according to the number of processes they possess. We have the unipolar neuron, which possess only one process, the bipolar neurons, which are neurons with two processes, and also we have the multipolar neurons, which possess more than two processes. We should note that a nerve appears as a white fine thread when looked at with an ordinary eye. It consists of hundreds of nerve fiber, both axons and dendrons, held together by connective tissues. Some nerves contain only sensory or motor fiber. Others, however, are mixed nerves carrying both sensory and motor fibers. The whitish appearance of the nerves is due to the fatty myelin sheath surrounding them. Functions of the central nervous system. The central nervous system serves as the seat of reasoning and intelligence. It helps to receive impulses from the sense organs. It helps to send impulses to the effectors which respond accordingly, and it also helps to interpret and integrate all reflex actions and coordinate all voluntary actions. The peripheral nervous system. The peripheral nervous system is the part of the nervous system that connects the central nervous system through series of nerves to the various parts of the body, also known as the receptors and effectors. The peripheral nervous system signals changes in the environment registered by the receptors to the central nervous system, which integrates the information it receives and sends appropriate message to the effectors. The peripheral nervous system, which is shortened as the PNS, consists of the somatic nervous system and the autonomic nervous system. The nerves of the PNS are of two types, which include the spinal nerves and the cranial nerves. The spinal nerves are connected to the spinal cord, while the cranial nerves are connected to the brain. The somatic nervous system. The somatic nervous system, which is shortened as the SNS, controls the voluntary actions of the body. This system is made up of 12 pairs of cranial nerves and 31 pairs of spinal nerves. Most of these nerves are mixed, that is, they contain nerves which transmit impulses from receptors in sense organs to the central nervous systems, and others that transmit impulses from the central nervous systems to effectors such as the muscles. Only two cranial nerves, the optic and the olfactory nerves, are separated or not mixed. The autonomic nervous system, shortened as the ANS, is concerned with the control of the body's involuntary activities. For example, the heartbeat, movement of the stomach and intestine, lungs, liver, and the pancreas. It enables the organism to know if anything has gone wrong with any internal organ and to bring about necessary changes in the organ. The ANS is divided into two main parts, which are the sympathetic and the parasympathetic systems. It controls activities which are independent of the brain. The sympathetic nervous system stimulates many parts of the body for necessary actions in time of danger. The control of this system is affected by the release of adrenaline hormone to the organs of the body involved. The actions involved include increase in the rate of heartbeat, raising the blood pressure, increase in blood sugar level, dilation of the pupil of the eyes, trachea and bronchi. It simultaneously inhibits the flow of saliva, peristalsis of the intestine, and relaxes the bladder, thereby delaying emptying. The parasympathetic nervous system counters the activities of the sympathetic nervous system by returning the animal to normalcy as soon as danger is over. This is done by slowing down the heartbeat, decreasing the blood pressure, increasing blood flow to the skin and viscera, and the constriction of the pupils of the eye, normal peristaltic movement of the stomach and intestine, and the contraction of the bladder so as to empty it. In both the sympathetic and the parasympathetic systems, nerve fiber come out from the brain or spinal cord and pass to the organ involved. The effects produced by these two systems are antagonistic. That is, if the sympathetic system causes the contraction of a muscle, the parasympathetic system relaxes it, and vice versa. On the screen are those factors that differentiate the sympathetic system from the parasympathetic system. The sympathetic system accelerates heartbeat, while the parasympathetic system slows down heartbeat. The sympathetic system dilates the iris, while the parasympathetic system constricts the iris. There is slow gut movement in the sympathetic movement, while the parasympathetic system speeds up gut movement. The sympathetic system dilates the bronchioles, while the parasympathetic system constricts the bronchioles. The sympathetic system relaxes the bladder, while the parasympathetic system contracts the bladder. The sympathetic system relaxes the anal sphincter, while the parasympathetic system contracts the anal sphincter. Sympathetic system inhibits saliva secretion, while the parasympathetic system stimulates saliva secretion. Sympathetic system increases blood sugar, while the parasympathetic system decreases blood sugar. We should note that the synapse is the point where one neuron connects with another. The transmission of an impulse across a synapse is by chemical means. When an impulse arrives at a synapse, a chemical substance known as the acetylcholine or ACT is released by the synaptic knobs of the dendrites. This chemical diffuses across the gap and causes the excitation of the postsynaptic neuron. The synapse directs the direction of the impulse, thus preventing an impulse from going in the wrong direction. A reflex action. A reflex action is an involuntary action. It is a fast automatic response to a stimulus by an organ or system of organs. It does not always involve the brain. Examples of reflex actions are beating of the heart, sneezing, movement of the gut, blinking of the eye when a foreign body touches the cornea, and the knee jerk. The part taken by the impulses during a reflex action is known as a reflex arc. The reflex arc is the simplest unit of nervous action. In the body of mammal, there are sense organs which receive messages from external stimuli. These are referred to as the sensory or receptor organs, that is the eye, ear, nose, tongue, and skin. From these sensory organs, neurons carry messages to the brain or spinal cord, and these neurons are known as sensory or afferent neurons. Neurons that relay the interpreted messages to the effector organs are the motor or efferent neurons. Intermediate neurons connect the sensory and the motor neuron together within the central nervous system. A reflex arc involves the motor or efferent neuron, the intermediate neuron, and the sensory neuron earlier mentioned. In a reflex action, such as the withdrawal of the hand when one accidentally touches a very hot object, on touching the hot object, the temperature, pain, and pressure receptors in the skin, that is the pain, pressure, and temperature corpuscles, are stimulated. The receptors set up an impulse through the sensory or afferent neurons. These neurons enter the spinal cord through the dorsal root. At the dorsal root, the cell bodies of several afferent neurons aggregate to form a swelling known as the dorsal root ganglion. The impulse is then brought to the spinal cord in the gray matter. In the gray matter of the spinal cord, the afferent neuron synapses with the intermediate neurons. Within the gray matter, the impulse is interpreted by the spinal cord, and the interpreted message is started off by the intermediate neurons, which then snaps with appropriate motor neurons. The motor neurons carry the interpreted message or impulse to the effector, that is the biceps muscles. The motor neurons leave the spinal cord through the ventral root. The biceps muscles receive the impulse, and these muscles contract, thereby bringing about the withdrawal of the hand from the hot object. Conditioned reflex actions. Conditioned reflex actions are behaviors which we cannot perform properly unless we first learn and then sufficiently practice them. Examples are walking, writing, dancing, reading, riding a bicycle, using a fork or spoon, using a typewriter, and driving a vehicle. Conditioned reflex actions make us acquire skills in the performance of our duties. These can be used in training dogs to salivate at the sound of a bell. This experiment was first demonstrated by a Russian psychologist called Ivan Pavlov. The voluntary action. The voluntary action involves conscious thought controlled by the cerebral cortex and not the spinal cord. Examples are walking to a point, beating up somebody, etc. Unlike the reflex action, it takes a longer time. The differences between the reflex action and the voluntary action, as you can see on the screen, are: in reflex action, action is started by muscle receptor cells, while in the voluntary action, action is started in the brain. A reflex action is an autonomic action, while the voluntary action is not an autonomic action. The reflex action is inborn, while the voluntary action is learned. The reflex action is very fast, while the voluntary action is relatively slow. The reflex action involves few neurons, while the voluntary action involves numerous neurons. In the reflex action, action involves the spinal cord, while in the voluntary action, action involves the brain.